It's Halloween time. What if you wanted to make a cool Halloween themed pattern or some wrapping paper, maybe some pumpkins, maybe some spooky ghosts, maybe you want to get real dark and gritty and some eldritch gothic stuff, you can do that. What about some cool floral patterns? You can do that as well. What about some weird techie patterns where you got like a cyberpunk city tiling everywhere? You can do that too. Cute cats? We got it. Clouds? We got it. MidJourney now supports seamless patterns and tiling as an option, and this is game-changing. I'm Addy. Welcome back to Analog Dreams, the channel dedicated to AI art and independent art, helping you master these weird tech tools to make your own art stuff and do cool stuff with it. And one of the biggest digital products on Etsy for crafty people at the moment is the concept of digital paper. And for the longest time, this never really clicked for me as to why it was a thing. It's basically just digital patterns that you can use as backgrounds, but these are used for scrapbooking, for doing your own digital paper designs to use as backgrounds, to use for sublimation, to print into shirts, or to just use as background prints to use in various products. And you can see here people have reviews of these things where they've used them for the backgrounds of certain things. These are clearly for different products that they're reviewing, but you can use them on shirts. Like I said, via sublimation. You could print your own wrapping paper. That'd be really expensive, but you could do it. Those kinds of things. And these are everywhere on Etsy. Like everyone and their mother has digital paper bundles, and there's a million of them bundled for like $4, which is really hard to compete with. I think that era is going to come to an end. The competition is going to increase because you can do this now in MidJourney. I'm going to show you how to set this up. If you're new to MidJourney, if you've never used Discord before, any of that, I have a whole MidJourney beginner's guide masterclass linked below that will get you completely up to speed, from making an account with Discord to using the interface to keeping track of all of these images you generate in the first place. All of it, I have a course linked below. This is for people who already know how to use it. So you need to have a general understanding of creating a prompt, and then I'm going to show you what you need to do, because they have added parameters or arguments that allow you to turn things into seamless patterns. And specifically, we're looking at here, --tile is the one to go with. Now, I do want to add a note in the first place. If I can scroll back up to the very, very top of my patterns, which may be impossible because you're going to burn through a lot of credits really quickly if you get hooked on this, because I have been generating them for days now leading up to being able to make this video. Let's hear. I started on the 26th. It's currently the 28th. Well, the 29th because it's past midnight. It's been an obsession. One thing I wanted to note is I did have issues generating an actual tileable, seamless image, or one that didn't look kind of funky when I changed the aspect ratio. This has not always been true, and they have since implemented fixes in general that help with the seamlessness, so you don't see seams like this. So maybe that's not a problem anymore, but I think you're going to have the best results with specifically 1:1, just the default aspect ratio images, which should be fine because it's a pattern. So if you want a wider image, then you just tile it in your editing application or whatever and make a wallpaper from it, for example. But you can make just about anything. Just keep in mind, you want to keep some fairly simple ideas when you're building up your patterns. So for example, I was looking into making a cool pattern based on like a cyberpunk cityscape. And this one right here, Cyberpunk City, Neo Tokyo, Beijing, Yoji Shinkawa style. I was trying to go for the Metal Gear theme. It didn't really recreate that, but I was using the tile mode here. And this is something I could see myself using as a background or something like that because it scales up. Now, I did want to mention that there is a website that you can use to make sure that your image is actually tileable. It's from paichung.com/checker. And you just drag in your image, and then you can scale up how big the image itself is. And so I have downloaded some images here. So for example, you can drag that on, and we can see here, there are no seams. It's a seamless pattern. This one looks kind of dumb, but you get the idea. And so I can come in here, and I'll just copy link instead of, but I mean, that's reasonable. Little cyberpunk cityscape kind of background, you know, as a background, possibly even blurred out, but as a background for something else, that actually works pretty well. But the more you try to frame it as something, as per many of my other kind of prompts, you will run into some issues. So for example, this is Cyberpunk Arcade in a dirty, crowded alley in a cyberpunk megacity, blah, 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 blah. This is good composition overall, but because it's doing a seamless pattern, it's going to look kind of awkward because it's going to put a single floor with floor and ceiling as, you know, the tiling. And so technically, this does still work. If we drag it in here, it's seamless, it tiles, but it looks kind of weird. You got to play with your framing. You want to keep your ideas very simple here. And so that's where the patterns, I mean, you can do some cool patterns. Like that one's all right. That one would scale a lot better. It's kind of nonsense, but again, its background would be fine. We did end up with a couple techie ones that I really kind of dig. This one, it obviously, all the details are just complete nonsense, but again, as a blurry background, it's kind of cool. The city one I showed you is pretty cool. That city one is also pretty cool. So you can get there. You got to play with your viewpoints. Like I said, keep it simple. But then you go for like the more abstract ideas. That one can look pretty cool as well. That gets to a lot more of a techie kind of pattern or something, which is pretty cool. So the prompt ideas that I had for this, we're doing, holiday based wrapping paper. So I did some Christmas present one and then was doing some Halloween's one. So we're talking ceramic autumn cornucopia centerpiece spooky Halloween vibes. Now, the MidJourney team says this works best with the --test_p and --creative parameters. These are some new algorithms that they use to basically kind of a beta version of MidJourney with test and test_p, and then creative is kind of like adding in stylize and chaos. It's hard to explain. I'll make a dedicated video towards it, but it seems to work best with this. This one was just done with --test instead of --test_p. You can see here we get some nice jack-o'-lanterns, and it's just spooky Halloween cartoons cutouts. Now, sometimes you can specify seamless pattern and it will give you some interesting results, but I have found sometimes it tries to create something based on what it thinks a seamless pattern is, and it kind of distorts what I'm aiming for. Whereas just describing the thing you want and then using the tile to force that to be a pattern, it has been a lot more successful for me. So for example, we're gonna copy this prompt. And so again, I personally recommend, basically seamless pattern was kind of a workaroundy, hacky kind of thing to try to get close to it before, and then you could modify it to get the rest of the way, whereas we don't need that anymore. And so I do recommend keeping your prompts as simple, not necessarily simple in style or anything. You don't need it to be cartoony or flat shaded or anything like that, but simple in terms of describing just a couple of subjects, not framing a scene. I think a lot of the prompt crafting, discussions thus far, and even stuff I'm going to focus on, I have a new video coming of a lot of really cool kind of hidden phrases that can improve your prompts for different things. A lot of that really focuses on the framing, the angles, the sense of scale. None of that really works here because you kind of want it to be this isometric flat view in order to really work as a seamless pattern. And so I recommend keeping it very simple. One that I really liked here, this is demonic horror Halloween decorations, Halloween spooky, evil, demonic, and cover art is one of those little things that sometimes works. And since I added the cover art, it made this like grid pattern as if it's like an album cover or something. Now you might think it's a problem that there's a line over here but not over there, but it actually keeps the tile going. And so it's a kind of cool effect. And in fact, if we drag that onto the seamless checker, I know I had it saved in here. It's one you'd want to use with a pretty high scale, but that effect is actually pretty cool. I kind of dig it. Now, if you want to use this as a digital paper pattern kind of thing, you will of course need to upscale it. I made a couple previous videos actually at this point about upscaling your AI generated images for printing and for things like that. Topaz Gigapixel is what I would use. You just want to aim for, the ones I've seen on Etsy have been 3200 by 3200 usually. I don't know if this one will say 12 by 12 inches. That's probably the way to go, like a vinyl sheet. And so 12 by 12 inches at 300 pixels per inch. So that works out to about 3600 by 3600. Somewhere in there is good for printing. I've been just doing 4x scale on Gigapixel, which gets me about like 8,000 something by 8,000 something, I think. Because it's 2048 by 2048 with most of the beta images. So yeah, 4x 8192 by 8192, which is plenty enough. Obviously make sure there's not artifacts, choose your correct algorithm, however you want, blah, blah, blah. But that would be the way I would recommend going. And then of course you need to bundle them up by theme or however if you want to try and compete this way. I don't know that I recommend it. People might get mad if you have ones that have a bunch of goofy shapes. You're going to have to spend a lot of time really carefully curating. But all right, here we go. test_p creative is ironically a little less creative because we're mostly just focused on jack-o'-lanterns, but I do really dig these. But these are some that I'm kind of talking about where you only get one little eye on it. People might think that, hey, that's a little freaky. But also, Halloween's about the spookiness and the randomness, so that's kind of okay. Now, if we don't have the new test algorithm at all, This is the seamless pattern part at work, where it tries, it reads what I say there and tries to generate something that looks like a floral pattern or something, which is actually kind of cool in its own way. But again, you don't have to include that, and you might get better results without it. All right, if you want to make a pattern for this in Photoshop to use on your own, import your image into Photoshop, and I do recommend using the upscaled version rather than the original resolution. It's just going to give you a much easier time to just use the cleanest version that's ready for print, that's ready for 300 DPI. Select all, Control A, go to Edit, Define Pattern. We're going to call this Halloween 15. That's fine. Click OK. And now if you're, for example, on the paint bucket tool, instead of foreground, you're on pattern, go to your patterns list. It should be down here. And now if I come back to a blank document, I can paste it, and it's going to be a pattern. Now, of course, my document is really small compared to that, so the pattern is going to be really big. So you may want to make different sizes. So for example, if we import the lower resolution version of this, Control A, Edit, Define Pattern, Halloween smaller. It's dependent on your size, which is kind of annoying, but also okay. Then we come in here, make a new layer, and paste it. Oh, we didn't. Did we not choose it? Yeah, we did not. Paste it. You can see here we get more of them because it's a smaller pattern. So you got to play around with how you want to offer that or how you want to implement it for your workflow, because my 8192 by 8192 is very big for whatever people are doing. And so in that case, you may want something smaller. I don't know that distributing Photoshop patterns is necessary given the weird scaling issue in the first place. The PNGs and the JPEGs and whatever are probably fine. Just wanted to show it regardless. But this is really interesting. Like, this capability is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And like I said, I've spent 2 days now just generating really cool stuff with it, both Halloween themed as well as other themes. As I scroll up through my massive backlog in this thread, I got really hyper focused on Halloween. But before that, I was doing cool space, planets and stuff like that, trying to get cool things without artifacts. I was getting cool little patterns, floral designs, cute, adorable little kitties and clouds and flowers. You can do a lot with this and make some cool stuff that people might actually want to use. The one thing I haven't been able to do, and if you have tips for this, leave them in the comments below. I want to make a Memphis-style random geometric shapes pattern from like Arcade Carpet or the Saved by the Bell intro, those kinds of things. And I've yet to find an example of this even generated in MidJourney. Nevertheless, figure out how to do it myself. I try invoking the Memphis design idea, by name. I try the random shapes. I've tried specifying each individual shape, and I do not get there. And like I said, I do not get... I haven't found in the feed anyone else being successful at this either, which has been really frustrating, and it's kind of surprising because they have so much included in the training data for this, or presumably. I guess we don't know as much about MidJourney specifically, but presumably they have so much in the training data because you can reference all sorts of other design styles that's kind of a common one or a popular one. And the fact that like they don't have it is just blowing my mind. Oh, that was another one I loved. Again, the line art itself is kind of crappy, but as a little scalable thing is pretty cool. But yeah, the fact that I can't make it really bugs me for some reason. So if you have any ideas or you've done it successfully, let me know, because it's been something I've been trying to generate for a very long time. And you see, I get these kinds of things, but that's not really what I'm going for. So I don't know. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what questions you have or what topics you'd like me to explore in the world of AI art in the comments below. Remember to be kind, rewind.